Hello, we are in my backyard today, and today's topic is going to be pruning. It's going to be fall pruning, which we don't do a lot of pruning in the fall, but there are a few things that we need to do just to get ready for the winter. This year we had a huge snowstorm, and it did a little bit of damage to a couple of our plants, or trees. And so we're going to show you a little bit about fixing those and getting them ready for the winter, and then we have a big project. This is Johnny Bolster. He's from Lococopia, and he's going to be talking a little bit about what we can do to help our apple trees and fruit trees get through the winter and then hopefully prosper in the spring. So,
yeah, that's
Johnny,
the plan.
Yeah, I think it's great. I have a really good project for you coming up, so
cool.
We'll see how that goes. But we're going to start with these plants here today. But tell me first, Johnny, how did you get into this, into Lococopia, and what's it all about?
Well, it really started off as just a hobby. I was living at a place up in Marlborough, an old farm that really hadn't been tended to for close to a decade even. And there was just so much growth on these trees, and I saw them as being a really great potential for fruit, and it had just been kind of a curiosity of mine for a while. So I just went ahead and started looking around online, you know, researching as much as I could about apple tree pruning. YouTube turned out to be a really great place for tutorials and to really get you know, the visual cues on how it's all done. And sure enough, I went out there and I started dabbling and pruning, and just quickly realized that there are so many of these trees in this area, so many of them forgotten along roadsides, deep in the woods, everywhere, all capable of producing beautiful heirloom apples. They just need a little work.
Yeah.
And so Lococopia is basically a wild harvest reclamation service where we go out, we find these trees, you know, some homeowners may point them out to us, and we come out and do demonstrations. We do workshops, free clinics where people can attend and watch that happening and ask questions and give it a try and really get up to speed.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah. So at the end of the show, we'll have information as to how you can contact Johnny for some of those services. But I just wanted to let you know, on my way here today, I actually passed by a tree and I thought, you know what, I'm never going to look at a tree the same way as I have before until now, because what we're going to do today is we're going to look at that big overgrown apple tree and take down some of the branches and such. But what we're going to do today first is start off with this tree here. Okay. We have a couple of apple trees that were planted just this season here, and as I said, during the snowstorm, the branch here fell over. And it still looks viable because it's still green, it's still connected, but it needs a little care. Yeah, so you're going to help us on what we should do for that?
Sure,
okay.
Sure, yeah.
And then maybe a little bit, I don't want to damage it anymore, but and then maybe some of the little trimming that we should do in order to get this tree through the winter, because some of these branches look kind of long here. And I think, you know, with some of the snowstorms that we get, these could really fold over and then have the same thing happen as this branch did here.
You're absolutely right, Jody. In the fall, it's important to not over prune a tree. At the same time, we don't want to neglect it, because that can be as damaging as doing too much. It is very difficult to kill a tree by pruning it. However, since these are so young, in addition to the fact that it is the fall, we're going to do a very light pruning and do a little work on that broken branch there. Okay. It's quite possible that this may, over the long run, not be able to have the strength necessary to be able to sustain any fruit production. But and luckily enough, in this particular tree, we've got a lot of other options where we can work with. But for, you know, if you have a tree and that's the only one you got and you got to save it, we'll show you how to do that.
Sure. Yeah, and you know, it doesn't hurt to try to save something anyway. You know. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but at least you've tried.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
So let's go ahead, and how would you go about this?
Okay. Well,
why don't you show us?
Sure. Well, the first thing we got to do is brace the tree here, and I've got a little stick here that I've trimmed off, and we've got some tape. Now, the first thing what we got to do is basically, it's kind of like creating a splint for a broken arm. We'll probably put 2 points of security on either side, so it's good and solid. Let me just grab some scissors. Okay. We've got this lovely pink Velcro tape, which should work well. And we're just going to cut off a couple of, maybe about 3 inches for each section. Okay. That ought to do it.
Okay.
Okay.
And now, do you need the beeswax?
Yeah, the beeswax we'll put on after we've placed the rest of it on there, and the purpose of that is really to seal it up,
I see.
so that the wood doesn't dry out.
Okay.
You know, the growth part is on the outside, and if we can, you know, keep that sealed up from the air, then it's going to have a much better chance of really sealing over. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of this tape, a little longer section, and use that as a temporary brace to hold the branch up while we're working on it.
Okay.
So I'm going to very gently just lift that up.
Unlike me before.
Yeah. All right, I'll take this, wrap it around here.
Yeah, this Velcro tape actually looks like it's going to work pretty well.
I think so, yeah.
And it doesn't, you know, so this way you don't have to struggle with it taking it apart because it's a real tape.
Right. I think the best way to do this would probably be to wrap it around and then turn it over.
And sometimes they said on the directions you can use it a couple of times.
Okay,
You know,
yep.
And it'll give you a little more strength too.
Sure, that's a good idea. So just bring it back over here. And I'll take your suggestion. We'll go right around one more time.
Okay.
Turn it again. There. Now we can work
looks
with it.
Great. Okay.
Now the next thing to do, as I said, is we're just going to secure a little bit of that on either side of the break. And it's okay to go ahead and you know, for now, just to make this nice and snug. The nice thing about the Velcro is you can easily reposition it as the tree starts to grow over the next few years. You will want to loosen that up so it doesn't strangle the tree, so we get good flow of sap. And around base here.
And it's quite fashionable too.
Yeah.
I like the contrast between the green and the pink.
And one more piece ought to do it.
So that's really all you needed, really. And so it didn't really need to be covered over. It just needs to give enough connection so that the plant will do its own thing.
Exactly.
And grow back together.
Yeah. And the same thing is true with new cuts. I'll point out later that a lot of times people think that you need to use some kind of product to seal up a new cut. But the reality is the tree is actually capable of doing it all on its own, as long as we've got it in the right time of year and it's not going to be exposed to any you know, really freezing temperatures. It should be fine.
Okay.
All right, so the next step here is to use a little beeswax just to seal that up so that it doesn't dry out.
Yeah. And let me see, do I have any beeswax? Yes,
Good chance
I do.
you do.
Yeah. So I did melt this for you a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
So here's some wax, and actually the bees are flying today, so they're very attracted to this wax. But this wax is what we're going to use for the outside of the bark. So I'm going to let you do that because the bees seem to be flying quite a bit around us, so we'll let you do that pretty quickly, and then we'll go on from there.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah.
Okay.
As Joey said, this is just regular beeswax, and the purpose of applying this is so that we can seal up that break in the branch. I'm just going to kind of dab it on there, and if you've got a paintbrush, that'll work fine. Really want to just kind of build it up there to seal it up from the air so that stick doesn't dry out too quickly and it gets a chance to...
And honey actually has an antibacterial, antiseptic kind of quality to it too. So
Yeah.
that was why I was thinking that you would be using it at first, but it works for twofold, really. Yep.
That's right. And you can put it on generously. Can't put too much on. You can only put too little on, I'd say. And that should do it. There are other products out there made for this purpose. You can really use either one. Many of them have a percentage of beeswax in them, so you know, if you have a ready supply of beeswax, you might as well go with the real thing. For the purposes that Jody mentioned.
Great. And it's also going to attract the bees, because I can see one that already just landed on it.
That's
but
right.
It's
can
all
feel
a
at
good
home.
thing. At least it's a natural way of doing it.
Yeah. All right, that ought to do it.
So what they do is they smell the honey. in the wax. So
Yeah.
Okay, so this tree is pretty much set for right now. Will we leave this here, do you think?
Yeah, it'd be a good
Okay.
idea for now, especially with the the coming snow and potential ice. It will add a little extra reinforcement throughout the year, so that that heal can happen and a little strength can be built up.
Great, great. Okay, so we probably will put some stakes in the ground to hold it, but we
That's a
won't
good
go into
idea.
that right now.
Okay.
But just tell me, where would we want to put the ties on the plant?
Okay, well,
Actually, I'll just get the stick
Okay.
and we can just to give a quick example, we won't put them in the
Sure,
ground.
sure,
But
sure.
say we were putting a stick here.
Yep, yeah, that'd be fine. You basically, when you're putting a stake in, you just want to be careful as you're working it down into the ground that you're not going into a major root. You know, so you might have to kind of wiggle it side to side so it goes in relatively easy. Especially with a young tree like this, where the root ball is very fragile and it's still developing. We don't want to
Okay. So would you want to
cause
put
any detriment.
Would you put another one of these ties like right here? Do you put it underneath a place where the branches joint out? Is that what you would do?
You're referring
Just so
to
that you're not harming the tree?
Okay, you're talking about where you would tie it from the
Right.
stake. Yeah, that'd be a good spot. Anywhere underneath the branch would be okay.
Will these little branches here or these little buds turn into branches?
They will. Yep, if left untrimmed, they will.
Okay.
And with a new tree like this, you kind of have a lot of give and take on where exactly you'll have the eventual branches growing. I like to not be too quick to trim off branches that could be useful, especially in a case like this, when you have a really substantial branch that you got all this hope in, and then it breaks on you, and you're like, oh no. So to have a backup for a little while is a good idea.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So we'll come back later and do that.
Okay.
Why don't we do a little bit of trimming,
Okay.
and then we've got another apple tree, and then we've got the major project.
Okay, I'm looking forward to it. All right. So as we were talking about, this is a rather young tree, and so we're going to do a very minimal amount of pruning, especially since we're in the fall right now and we've got cold weather coming up. So the main things we look for, we'll start with this branch that's we've already been working on. Any branches that are growing underneath, sort of on the underside of the branch, as the weight increases, that's going to head more and more towards the ground. And obviously we don't want to do that, because if the branches are making any contact with the ground, then we've got a lot of pests and funguses and things that can make their way up into the tree. So we're really trying to avoid that. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and trim this off. Now, when I make my cuts, I'm careful to trim it just outside the collar. And that's the area where the healing can happen. If I trim too far in there, then it may dry out and kind of work into the the main leader here.
Now, are we going to have to put honey, or excuse me, the wax on these as well?
Jody's asking if whether or not this new cut here needs to be sealed. And in the past, there's been, the popular thought has been, yeah, you should seal it up with some kind of a paint or what have you. But the reality is, the tree is really capable of healing itself up without any extra.
Excellent.
Yeah, so
Excellent.
that'd be fine.
Okay.
One thing that has been recommended before is you can take just a little bit of dirt and you can actually rub it right into the cut, and that'll kind of seal it up from the elements and give it a head start. So that's up to you. Not necessary. Down here, here's another branch that we could go ahead and trim. It's really on its way down, and once you get a single apple on there, it's just going to be right down in the ground. And luckily, we have a really nice upturned sprout here. So I'm going to go ahead and just trim that off just as far up as I can, but outside that collar. Now, mind you, this branch that's right here may, in the years to come, be taken off because it's starting so low. And generally speaking, we want to have any branches that are about any less than 2 feet from the ground just taken off, just because you're starting off so low, it has a potential of ending up on the ground within a short time.
Okay, so would we cut those off now, or would we cut those off in the spring?
Well, I would just wait, because the other thought is that this could turn into a beautiful branch, and so it's low, no big deal, as long as you train it up, and then out it'll be okay.
All right.
So there's another one back here, and I'm just going to go ahead and take that off so that this more potential branch has the juice flowing to it. And I'll take that off. Now we're looking for any branches that are happening right at the base. And let's see if I can give you a good example. I'm not going to make any more cuts at this point, but these branches are coming up here. This is a nice division, and so this branch just below it is actually taking away from all of this. So it would be advisable to trim that one off as well. As I said, it's good to kind of be conservative with a new tree because it's trying to get its roots down and everything and get really solid. But at some point we'll decide what the main offshoots will be. This branch that's going up through the middle here is kind of an example of something that I might decide to trim off there so as to give a very open feel of the apple tree. At the same time, this gives a nice opportunity to do just the very same thing right up here. So we may decide that over the years that this is the place that we want to start the actual upside down umbrella shape of the apple tree.
Because the apples are looking for sun, right?
That's right.
That's what you're really doing, is you're pruning the tree so that the apples will have the most sun so they can mature in the best manner.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
Now it's worthwhile at this point just to go through, and any little buds that are growing underneath, those can be trimmed off. That wouldn't be a problem. And any of these little branches, you can see little sprouts coming out as well. We could just kind of pluck those off. Any of these downward growing leaves. Most of this will fall, but if you see any of the buds, you can go ahead and just kind of rake it off with your thumbnail or whatever.
So as you practice more on pruning, you want to look for certain buds that are going upward instead of downward, because you want all of your growth to go upward. But I know that Johnny will tell you a little bit more about those as well.
Sure. Yeah. And just a few more off there, and that's good. Yeah, Jody's absolutely correct. Most of the growth should be going upward and outward. You'll see some examples on a tree we'll work on later of a water shoot. And a water shoot is something that will just want to grow up as tall as can be and reach the sun. That's the tree part of the apple tree. What we're looking to encourage is the fruiting part of that apple tree. And that's why pruning is so important, because it kind of gets the tree thinking, oh, I'm gonna die. And that concern about dying causes it to want to say, hey, I need to perpetuate my genetic strain here, so I'm going to start producing fruit and seeds in that fruit. So that's basically the angle we're trying to go here.
Great, great. So anything else that we would do on this for the fall right now?
Nope, I think that'd be good. Again, when we're pruning in the fall, we're really looking to do what's beneficial for the tree. Too much pruning is obviously not beneficial, and too little pruning is also not beneficial, due to the fact that if any snow or ice gets kind of clogged in here, it's going to cause the tree to bend over. Heavy winds could take it right down. So we're really just looking to reduce it. But for now, this is a nice looking tree, and I think it's well suited at the moment.
Great. Yeah. Well, we have one more tree to look at quickly, and then we'll get over to the other one. So let's go over and check out that other tree then.
Okay, sounds great. Yeah.
So this is the other tree, the other specimen.
Yeah.
So it's got a couple of things that we can talk about here, so I'll let you get started and see what we have.
Okay. We got a lot of the similar things happening in this tree as the last one we just worked on. You can see some of these branches down here are quite low, so eventually those should be trimmed right off. So actually, since those are so low and they're pretty new growth, we'll go ahead and just trim a few off. Again, the trimming is really important to make a nice clean cut, because any extra breaking, it's just that much more difficult for the tree to heal up. And when this is such a young tree, it's unnecessary.
So that's another reason that it's very important to have your tools sharp.
Nice and sharp,
right.
Yeah, because you don't want to end up breaking. And you'll develop a little technique on how to actually make the cut. Now, what I recommend is making the blade come up from beneath, because a couple of reasons for that. You can get the blade just at the right spot, just outside the collar, and you don't risk actually putting a downward pressure on the limb, which could could actually, you know, tear it away from the central trunk. So,
And you know, one other thing that people might not realize too is when you have your scissors, there's only one side that's moving. So that's another thing to think about is that that blade part isn't moving, it's this other part that's moving.
Exactly, exactly. Now we've got a little twig on the back side here that's really not doing anything at all, so I'm just going to go ahead and trim that off. And then there's a little twig coming off the back and the lower side of this branch as well, so give that a little snip. Now this tree is an example of what a tree will do if it's just completely left untended. It'll just grow up and up and up and up and up. So this would be a good opportunity to do a little staking. And what I would do is basically just put one on either opposite side of this, so we can keep the central trunk basically in the same place, and then just kind of, you know, play it back, not so far that you hear any cracking or snapping or anything like that. That's a telltale sign you've gone too far.
Yeah.
But basically just trying to open up the center of this to get the sun down in there, to keep air circulation. And
eventually these branches will stay in that, way.
Yeah, yeah. Now I find that if you have a much larger branch that, you know, sometimes you get a water shoot that's left for 10 years and it ends up, you know, like another tree.
Right.
Those are able to be bent, and in particular in the spring you'll find that there's no sap in there, so that all the cells haven't swollen, so it's actually really flexible. And it's just amazing how far you can bend that tree down and train it into a fruit-bearing branch.
So what about like watering, or, you know, is there little bits of grass here, things like that? What do you think we should do with those?
Okay, yeah, water's a really a critical thing in a new tree like this and trying to get those roots growing. And so any weeds, grass alike that's growing down there should definitely be taken away. Any leaves should be cleared from that space because you get a lot of leaf-borne illnesses. And you want to create a nice little pool. So a lot of times what happens is you end up with you know, your root ball right out of the store.
Yeah, because I think the root ball would come to about here.
Exactly. And sometimes we just don't get it quite low enough. So it's important to have a little bit of a depression so that any of the rainwater will just end up going right, you know, around the roots and then working its way in. So I like to just go around and
so the homeowner should probably dig this out just a little bit, just to make a little ridge here, and then they'll be that much better off, and it makes it better too, so you don't have to water quite as often too, because it won't run off.
Yes, yeah, correct.
Good. Okay. Anything else that we need to do on this tree? Any other cuts that you see that are necessary for the fall?
Yeah, I'll do a few. There's a little bit here. Anything that's going directly into the center, obviously.
Again, that's going to make it more shaded.
Correct. Yep. Should definitely come off.
Yep.
If you have like a little growth at the base of a branch, you can just take that off. I mean, that'll fall off anyway. You kind of want to decide where's the center, and in this case, theoretically, if we were to keep this branch and this branch, then it would be this one in the middle that we would take off.
Okay.
But again, since this is the fall, I don't want to make any major cuts on this little guy.
Yep. Now, do you think that these branches so tall right now, with the winter coming, are these going to end up drooping over, or because we're going to stake them up, is that going to be enough? It's
going to help a lot. Yeah. I mean, you may decide that if even if we go ahead and we stake it out like that, just to keep it from, you know, going all the way accidentally with all the, you know, the snow, it might be good to brace it in the middle. So we don't get an unfortunate split here.
Yeah. So would we cut any of these off this year?
Nope, I wouldn't cut any of that. Nope, that'll be fine, and that's a good length. And then the thing to do is, as this continues to grow, we're just going to be taking stuff off the outside here. And sometimes you don't know, if a branch is going right up in the air like that, you don't know exactly where it's going to end up once it starts producing fruit. So you just, you know, kind of simulate that by giving a little tension in the direction that it most naturally wants to go. And unfortunately, this one would probably want to go over that direction.
Right. Well, the north is from this direction, so the wind's going to blow this way anyway.
Sure. But we really want to kind of almost force the tree to do what we want, so that, you know, for its sake in the long run. So we just kind of bring it over on down like this, and then any of the leaves that are on the underside also have little buds as well. We're just going to pluck those off, and that should do it.
Okay. Good. All right, well, I can hear something calling. That huge apple tree with all the grapevines on it. We've got to go over and tackle that.
Begging for our help, isn't it?
Yeah, so we're going to head down a ways, and there's an apple tree down here that we're going to be dealing with, and we'll see what we can do to make it look a little bit healthier and have a little better chance to have apples next year. Okay, so let's go.
Okay, great.
All right. Wow. It's a jungle, isn't it? Yeah, this is a big job. This is our specimen, and we have an apple tree here that is totally overgrown. It has grapevines all over it, and I don't know how we're going to do this. And we've only got 2 minutes left.
It's going to take a lot longer than that.
So I think what we're going to have to do today is, this is part one, and you're going to have to come back for part two, because Johnny, I think you've got a big job ahead of you here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
it's going to be some fun.
Yeah, yeah. As always, if you are interested in becoming a guest, just like Johnny is today with us, or you have a topic that you'd like to hear us discuss or bring up, just give us an email. Our email address is inmybackyard@gmail.com, and you can give your information to us, and we'll look it over and see what we can do. So, okay, part two's coming along.
Yeah.
Please stay tuned, and we'll see you on our next In My Backyard.